Thank you. Thank you very much, Alicia, and welcome everybody. I'm very humbled when you give me an introduction like that. And ultimately, what I would say is it's funny when people call me an expert because I don't feel it at all because I am learning all the time still. I still talk to people, I still pick people's brains. The market's changing all the time. And I suppose what I'm experienced at now is how I find this information and where to go to find this information. Because seriously, as everybody knows, everything's changing all the time. So every time I work with a new school or I work on a new project, I go right back to the beginning and I start researching right from the very start. Obviously, I do have the experience that helps there. Very briefly, I've been working for 6 years in education. Before that, I was working in international marketing. So I am used to working with different cultures and with different nationalities, which obviously helps. In education, my experience has been mostly in Asia, Africa, Europe, and Russia. I am still looking at other regions and areas, but again, that's where my main experience is. And as I said, the market is changing all the time. So what I wanted to do for you today really was to sort of give you an introduction and talk to you about how I go about taking on a new project and putting together a marketing strategy, an international marketing strategy right from scratch. So I've got lots of questions that I'd hope that you will, see that I question every time and that you can take away. First of all, international marketing, it's very competitive, and I think that you mustn't underestimate that. Unlike when you're marketing day schools and into the domestic market, quite often you might have a geographical location that you're promoting to, and there's a set number of schools, and you know exactly who your competition is, and you can do your competitor analysis, and you know where you're going to pitch yourselves. When you're marketing internationally, you are actually marketing against the whole world, because not only is it every other boarding school in the UK, but actually I find myself more and more talking about British boarding and why are families now they're going to Canada, they're going to Australia, especially when you're working in the Asian market. It's actually a lot closer for them to go to Australia than it is to come to the UK. So you're actually talking much broader than just your individual product or school. I do tend to talk in sales terms. I try to watch myself, so sometimes I call schools products, but ultimately I hope you get what I mean. It can be expensive, and especially if you spread yourself too thinly, which is why the planning is really important. And I'll talk a bit more about that. International markets are clever, and I wanted to share that with you because they now have access to information. They have access to reviews, all the different websites. There's lots of directories out there. But also, if you're looking to recruit students, quite often now we're talking about second generation. So their parents were in boarding schools now. So there's a history and a knowledge there. You can't just wing it. They are clever and they will do their research. You have to take into consideration all the cultural differences, and I just can't I can't really underestimate that. Talking to families in Africa is very different to talking to families in Asia, and then even within those continents, if you break it down to the different countries. So you have to be aware of that. I've said that market research is essential, but also us as international marketers, we've also got to be aware that we've got to be complying and proposing projects that are going to be compliant with all the visa regulations. So when we identify what we're trying to promote to students, we want to make sure that they're going to be able to get their visas on time, that they're going to be able to comply with all of the UKVI regulations. Obviously, you're working in time zones, and it is not unusual for me to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and do a webinar over in Asia. That's something to consider. And also, if you want to get, other members of your team involved as well, maybe the head is going to join a webinar, you just need to be aware of that as well. And it's also the different channels that you can select to then start communicating. It's not straightforward. It's not like your sort of domestic market where you would consider your digital, your advertising. you're now going to be looking at what channels, what social media channels there are in country. You know, in China, you can't get Facebook and a lot of the other channels that we rely on heavily. They have special in Thailand, they use a different WhatsApp variety called Link. And you need to find out what all the different channels are for the regions, which is why it's so important that you don't spread yourself so thinly and you pull together a marketing strategy. So what I wanted to do, and it's very difficult when I'm delivering a webinar remotely, because if it was in person, I'd want to try and make it as practical as possible. So I wanted to sort of try and help you pull together the bones of a marketing strategy, an international marketing strategy for your school or education establishment. And, you know, if I was there in person, there's 6 questions that we're going to be addressing to help you do that. So I'd sort of almost say, get your 6 questions down, because this is what I'm going to be addressing. You know, this is it. Now, the reasons why international boarding students come to the UK, I think I actually created this little diagram about a year ago now for a client, and I've just referred to it on so many different times now that I just think I wanted to share it with you, because it's not just education. There are different reasons why families will choose the UK for their child. And I can send this out to you, or yeah, we can share these, or you can drop me a message and I can send this to you. But all of these different reasons are important. Not every school is able to provide them, and I don't think any school can say that they do provide them all well. What you've got to be aware of is what you can provide, and make sure that you match that to the market that wants those qualities. Okay. So, take what exactly is your product? This is this question. What are your school's USPs? Now, I don't know whether you've been in any of the presentations. I've heard schools being referred to in the past as cans of baked beans, in that, you know, you look, they've all got very professional websites. They all boast excellent academic results and strong pastoral care. And, you know, quite often, you know, on that sort of cold base, possibly that's what they do. However, families want a lot more information. And if you're going to be working with education agents, they want a lot more information. And I think actually one of my most successful trips ever was when I went over in country and all I spoke about were the maths results we'd had that year. And actually, I didn't talk much about anything else, but maths was particularly strong. I could evidence that maths was really strong with the results. And that year we had a real surge of really strong maths applicants, because sometimes people are just given too much choice. And actually, we've got to be aware that the size of the market, you know, it's not, you know, it isn't massive, but there are going to be students that are right for your school. So if you can identify what your USPs are, then it will help you find those right students. You also have to be aware that you want the students to stay with you. So you can't, you know, you can't really get that wrong. You want them to stay. So your USPs, do you have subjects that you're specialist in? Are you a basketball school? Are you on a beach? There's lots of different things. And most people that you talk to will say, what's your school known for? Now, if you can say 2 or 3 things that your school is really strong at, that is definitely going to help you. What's your school's academic profile? Now, if you're marketing in China and Hong Kong, they are going to want strong results and you know, leading ranked schools. If you're marketing in a number of the European countries or South America, for example, that's not necessarily going to be the case. They might be after something else. So just be aware, what is your school's academic profile? I always talk about the curriculum as well, because you have to be aware a lot of countries don't have the same school structure as us. Sometimes they don't even have the same academic year as us. So it's very easy for us to say the start of the school year and assume that they know it's September. But actually, in their country, it might be January. So just make sure that you're very aware of the school's academic offering. Quite often they want to know A-level results, and they just look at the A star and A's. Now, have that information up your sleeve. That might be something that you choose then not to promote. But if you're saying that you're an academically strong school and they then look up your scores and they see those results and see that you're not, you're going to lose trust there. What's your boarding provision like? Now, a lot of schools boast comfortable boarding houses, but families, when they're coming to place their children in schools, they will want to know, is it singles? Is it dormitory style? Are they en suite? Are they new? Are they traditional? And I've worked with a number of schools that have completely different offerings. And actually, sometimes you think that the modern houses are going to be the ones that are the most well received. But actually, quite often, a number of families choose the more sort of homely, lived-in style. And they think, oh, their child's going to feel very comfortable here. But just make sure that you're aware of what provision is like. Facilities, that's going to be a question that's always asked. Now, it's always assumed that independent schools have very good facilities, or if you're a state school, that you've got these, the facilities that you're boasting. But just make sure you know, especially again, if you're talking to markets where they're not chasing the academic rankings, but they're going to be chasing the sporting programs or the co-curricular programs. And then I say this and it almost makes me laugh, what's your geographical location? Because I know that teachers will cringe massively, but I have seriously started conversations talking about how close I am to Gatwick Airport for a particular school. And that's because the families want to make sure that it's very accessible. And the teachers will say, oh my goodness, we've just done amazing in our A-levels and we've got this, that and the other happening in school. And you open a conversation with how close you are to Gatwick. However, to families, that's really important. So get all of this information and pull it all together so that you know exactly what the product is and what the school is that you're going to be promoting. So who are you going to attract? Who will be the target market? Again, you have to be specific here because different countries have different entry points. So I've just recently been in Japan. And for example, their elementary school finishes at year 10 and they have families that want to send their children in year 11 over to the UK. Now, unless you're going to be offering an entry at year 11 or 1 year IGCSE or some form of foundation course, they're not going to be interested if you're saying you can only join in year 10 or year 12. So you just need to make sure that you're really aware of what ages you can accept those boarders into. What type of child would thrive in your environment? Now, I'm often asked this by families, and match it. There's no point saying that if you're a school that has lots of outdoor education and outdoor activities, there's no point not saying that, because if you have somebody that's very much interested in the maths society and the more academic side of the world, chances are they're not going to enjoy your school and it's not going to work. So make sure you almost have a persona of the child that would thrive well in your environment. How many students can you accept? That it seems basic, but it's amazing how many schools I work with and they don't actually know how many beds they're going to have free the following September. You need to have this information on hand all the time, because there will be that conversation you have at some point with an agent that will ask you, and you need to be able to respond. And I've put in here about price points because there's a range of different prices that schools charge. And, there are what we call bursary markets. So unless your bursar is happy for you to give some form of discount, sometimes it might not be worth tapping into that market. So you need to get a full understanding of whether you're going to have the ability to offer discounts or bursaries or scholarships to a market. So the big question, and I think quite often people jump to this first when they're pulling together an international strategy, they just start thinking about where are you going to market. Now, if you had a clean slate and you had, and you were just told, right, you haven't picked up an international marketing strategy at all, and you're just told, right, we want to go international, this is how I would go about it. First of all, I'd look at any current borders, nationalities. And I'd look to see if there's any clusters that you can then build on. And then leading from that, it would be the alumni networks that you might have within school. Are there hubs of alumni groups that you could start to talk to? And usually, if there are, they are more than willing to help. If you go in country, they will want to meet up with you, and they actually can relieve quite a lot of stress in your planning of the trip. Do you need quick wins? Now, most of the time, I talk to schools, and the reason why they've got in contact with me is because they do need quick wins. They are chasing numbers for next September or quickly. This, you need to know this. And there are definitely markets where decision making is much quicker and where they've got more students. I have to say, you won't be surprised. China and Hong Kong are the biggest markets. If you need students quickly, most schools would go to China and Hong Kong. However, I think almost because there is so many students there, a number of schools now have got boarding houses full of just one or two nationalities, and they're now looking to diverse. So what are your long-term goals? And I think most schools would probably say that they want to have a boarding house that has a number of different nationalities and different cultures that they can mix. But know that, because if you're putting together a strategy, it will be that you could have your short-term goals is this September, but your long-term is to start diversifying into different regions. And then research the market. And we do have a number of resources that are available to us. I always look at the ISC census every year. That talks about how many students are in the UK with families living abroad. If your school is a member of the British Boarding School Network, they have great resources on their portal. Anybody can join the Study Travel Alfie website. You can join as a school or as an individual, and that gives you access to lots and lots of agents and information about different markets. And then there's the Independent School Council census. Oh, I've said that twice, actually. Oh, silly of me. But what I would say is make sure you look at the numbers. So I've just taken this, and this is just an example, and it's by all means not all the countries that have students in the UK. But it just, there's a lot of schools that have said to me, oh, well, we've done lots of work in Hong Kong and China and it's all going really well. But we think that, we're going to actually start going to Malaysia and India now. And actually, when you look at the figures, you think, well, that's great. But just be aware there's difference in the size of the market. This chart here represents new students that joined in 2022, and you'll just see, the difference. And sometimes I think it seems a lot of governors are quite obsessed as well about India. Everybody seems to think there's lots of students from India. And I think quite often maybe if a geographical location is doing well in the university market, people just assume it will be the same for boarding. So just be aware of markets. And if you're reporting into governors or your bursar or your head, it's quite useful to share the size of the market with them so that they get an understanding as well. This next one as well is a more recent, it's got more recent stats actually. This is from the 2023 census, and it shows you, this is the number of non-British pupils with parents overseas, but you'll see how mainland China peaked, but has dipped. Obviously, that would be because of the pandemic. But you'll see Europe, Russia, and it's just useful. There's heaps of really easy information. And if anybody wants a copy of that, you can find it on their website, but if anybody wants a copy of any of these resources, you can just let me know and I can send them over to you, because I do refer to them quite a bit. Right. So what I would do then is, once you've read all the market reports, you've considered what your school has to offer, and you've started to match, that's when you need to start to match. And when I was pulling this presentation together, I actually thought, do you know what, I could almost do half an hour on every single region, because there is so much information out there. But just as a bit of an overview, Hong Kong, for example, and mainland China, their parents want academics, and league tables are very important. So if you know that you're an academically strong school, that would be a good place to start. They want a lot more, and you would need to have a sales pitch that obviously includes a lot more, but those would be the top line highlights that they would want. In Europe, it's very important, the English language development, the facilities, the co-curricular programs. This isn't something necessarily that they have a lot of access to in their schools, and it's one of the beauties and one of the things that attracts them to the UK. So if you were going to talk to families or agents in Europe, for example, you would be highlighting the co-curricular activities, the evening and weekend programs for boarders, and you would build up the sort of highlights that will appeal to that market. South America market, sporting programs are very important. I mean, obviously, there's more things than just sporting programs, especially football. You know, there's a love of football, although Chile now are in the Rugby World Cup. So there has been a bit of a surge of interest in rugby schools, but up until more recently, just football. In Nigeria, a lot of the families I speak to, they want to know, is your school a Christian school? Will their children have a chance to worship? Football is very important as well. I feel like I'm giving Nigeria a bit of a disservice here because they also are very aspirational. Families are aspirational. They've got ambitions. They want to know the university pathways. They want to know, do you have families that apply to Oxbridge or the Russell Group universities? And they will know and want to know that information. Or if you're talking to Russian families or agents, you know, they want safety. They want to know their children are going to be looked after. I've done quite a bit of work with some Russian agents where they did some research on the differences of our schooling and their schooling systems. And their parents are very nervous that their children aren't going to be able to sort of succeed and do well in the British schools. So you need to be aware of what the differences are so that you can then, you know, work to make them feel happy and safe. So, how are you going to find these students? You know what you're trying to promote, you know where you're trying to promote, and how are you going to now find these students? Well, as you can imagine, there are a number of resources that you can use. And, you know, if you're starting out, then, you know, you can't do all of this all at once. And I would do a timeline. But I've listed here some of the things that you would be doing. Now, I've put about translated possibly at the beginning for websites and brochures. There's some nationalities where the parents don't speak English. And so unless you're going to be working through an agent, you will need to consider having your promotional literature translated. I am a huge fan of video footage. And so if you can get some form of video footage, and it doesn't necessarily have to be professional, but if you can get some video footage that will show families what the bedrooms are like, what the campus is like, get the students involved, this will be massive and will massively help. Social media is always good for raising awareness. Beware though, because you could generate interest from a much wider audience than people that genuinely can afford your fees and want to come to a British school. One of the things that I think are the most important on here are probably the last three. And that is online webinars are great for talking to people. I mean, I try to talk to people all the time. I had a call this morning with an agent. I've got a call this afternoon with an agent. Make sure you can do as much face-to-face promotion as you possibly can because you're looking to build relationships. In-country events and then education agents are just absolutely key in my mind if you're pulling together an international marketing strategy. In a few slides ago, I listed some of the directories, the BBSN and the study travel. That's where you can start to make an inroad into which agents are in which country. And then talk to people, talk to fellow schools about agents that they might use. And what you need to do is you need to start building relationships with the education agents. I now have, you know, a number of agents in a number of countries that, you know, I work with. I make myself very available to. They are the bridge between us and international families. They help me when I'm new in market. I build trust with the agent first, and they will then help me pull together a campaign. And I never pretend if I don't know something, I'll say to them, what's the best way to get to your families? What are your families interested in? And really use your agent partners as exactly that, as partners. They have that local expertise and cultural understanding. They can help you reach the market. So when a lot of people will say next September, and they might, thinking, oh gosh, right, you want students for next September. Okay, that's fine. Well, I spoke a little bit earlier about the quick wins that you can go for. But also in your plan, have a bit more of a long-term strategy as well. So what interest can you generate over the next 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years even? Because when you're entering new markets, sometimes it does take that to actually develop. They'll be working with schools potentially already. And so you've got to break into their fold. You've got to build that trust, get the emotional connection with them so that they want to trust you and send their families to you. Bear in mind the academic year, like I said before, some schools, their academic year, some countries, their academic year is very different to ours. So, bear that in mind. And what I would do is develop a timeline. And I mean, this is very, very crude, but this is the sort of thing I would pull together. When are you going to write your brochures and book your flights? Travel, if you're traveling, a lot of schools recruit from September to December. That is sort of like a key recruitment time, because then families would then start doing the assessments October, November time with offers going out. There's usually then a second run of recruitment after Christmas, and that will be for last minute applicants for that September, or it will be for starting to lay the groundwork for the following September. But I think it's quite important to work out when your recruitment times are, and if you're going to do some travel. On the last slide, I did skip over it quite quickly, and I listed on there about recruitment events. There's both agent events and there's family events, and that's something that you should definitely try and consider and build into your program. Communication is key, so just keep communicating with your agents, write newsletters. If ever I meet an agent, one of the things I always want to do is try and get them to come to the school. So if you can join on a fam trip that's run by somebody already, which is fantastic. A fam trip is when a group of agents will come to your school. Familiarization trip, it's short for. The group of agents will be on an organized trip that are brought to your school, possibly for a day or an afternoon, and they are then bussed off to another school. But it's a great opportunity to get all of your staff, all of your teachers and your sports teams and your head on board, and make sure that you show your school in the best possible light. Videos, as I say, I think video footage is fabulous when you're trying to build trust and trying to show a school that's, people are potentially sending their children 4,000 miles away, and you're asking them, to just trust what a brochure says. Get some video footage, but if you can, always shoot it in the springtime, because it's just the light's better, there's less chance of rain, and you're going to get a better video. So just bear that in mind. But I would have a timeline like this that lists all my different activities, and I would schedule it in like this. And then what I've also done is, if I've been working with bursars, I've shown them my proposed timeline, and they've asked me to rag rate it. So I put green, orange or red at the end as to how important I think it is. And then they can go through and say, well, we can afford this, we can't afford that, blah, 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 blah. But it's quite a good way of putting together your strategy. Oh, I've been talking so much. Anyway, in conclusion, I've given you a very, very brief overview of how I start to pull together an international marketing strategy. But in conclusion, families, they want what's best for their children. And that goes the world over, and it's your job to help them. And if you remember that, I think that will help you pull your strategy together. And then that's just my information. If anybody would like to contact me afterwards, they can do. But we're going to be taking some questions now as well, aren't we?
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you, Sarah. That was brilliant. And it was a whistle-stop tour of everything. And I do think it's always important, as you say, about governors, is to come back to the ISC census, because I think quite often you get people piping up with, oh, we should get people from X country. And you do need to, I just think that data from the ISC census is just so helpful, because it just shows that actually, we can't just go off on whims. I also think it's interesting and good for people to hear how long it takes to get into new markets, because sometimes you might see the school down the road and they seem to have 4 or 5 children every year from a certain country. And you can think, why can't we manage that? But what you don't know is how much time, money, resource they've invested in building those links. So I think that was really helpful. I don't know, has anybody got any questions? Notoriously,
I want now to have a look at who's here. So we've got some people here that are really experienced anyway. So they might be able to help with the questions as well.
Experience tells me that schools marketers never ask questions. I went on and nobody puts anything in the comments. I went on a social marketing. It's called the Marketing Meetup. I'd really recommend it. Actually, it's free, and they do all kinds of different webinars for people who are in sort of mainstream marketing, and they're all like putting on selfies of their dogs and just like loads of chat. I was like, oh, it's made me realise how when we do our webinars with the Independent Schools Portal, how sort of serious everybody is. It was a completely different thing, but that is an aside. But I would recommend the Marketing Meetup. They do some really good free events. So no questions, I don't think. In that case, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I think it's been really useful, and I'm sure a lot of people will watch it back. And it's probably something worth sharing with your governors and with your heads, because I think, I know I'm a school governor, and I think sometimes you turn up to governors' meetings, but you're just getting told a report as what's happening. Whereas if you could signpost people and say, go and watch this if you want to learn a little bit more. It's a sad truth, isn't it, that hearing Sarah say these markets take a long time will have far more weight than if you yourself say it in a governor's meeting. So thank you, Sarah. I'd now like to hand over to, question, Jude?
Can I just ask a quick question? Is it possible to have a picture of a copy of the timeline that you've put in your presentation, Sarah?
Yes, of course, Jude. And Jude, you're one of the ones I was looking at. I said, you know loads of this information. Yes, no, I can send you I can send you a full, a much bigger one than that has a lot more in. But yeah, of course.
That would be really helpful, because it's just, like you say, and being able to rag rate it gives us a way of kind of managing expectations versus budget versus magic wands. And
so one that I recently did, I rag rated, and it was all about diversity. So I said, if you want heads on beds, you've got to do the green. But and I sort of rag rated it in terms of diversity and just beds on heads to give them an idea. So that at the end of the year, if there were anything that they crossed out of my budget, I could then refer back and say, well, actually, I didn't get the diversity because you took out those 2 trips or you took out those 2 activities. So I just use it almost as a better backup for myself.
That sounds
Sarah,
brilliant.
would you be happy sharing the slides? And
we'll
send them to everybody. That'd be great.
Yes, of course.
And we've had another question on the chat. Why do so many German families send their children to the UK?
Well, they do, because we've got, the thing is, though, actually, the regulations have changed around German universities. And so they want to come over and they want to learn their English language, come over for a year, but now they can return and then go to university in Germany. I mean, I think it's the English language and the reputation of UK schools.
Great. And
one of the things to know about Germany, however, though, is that there is one agent who holds the key to 75% of the students that come over here. So that is the one agent that you need to get in with.
And are you going to name them?
Well, it's the Glasmacher, Theresa Glasmacher.
Yeah, I thought so, but I just thought I'd double check because I've been out of the market for a while, so I thought it could have changed. And Sally has raised her hand.
Hi, it was just a really quick one about so I'm redoing this again. So I was at a school where I did it before and have done a few years where I haven't, and now we are back in the game. And I've done my market research and segmentation, and I know the places we're going to target initially. I love the timeline. That's fantastic, Sarah. Thank you for that. But my question is that there are so many, when we determine that, let's just say hypothetically we're looking at Nigeria, and let's just say hypothetically 3 or 4 different people have said, yes, we're running an event. How on earth do we know how successful that's going to be? Because it's a long way to go to find half a dozen families and so on and so forth. Something like Alfie, or the more the metropolis organized things, that's somebody who knows what they're doing, has researched that and coordinated it, and you're more inclined to take a punt with that. Is it just a question of leaping in and hoping? That seems like a not great strategy.
Are you talking about agents that are running events?
Yes.
Right. Yes. Well, because so I've done a number of agent events in Nigeria, and actually the best trips for me are ones that I've organised and gone out independently to visit now, where I do my own work. That's by far better. But what I found with the events in Nigeria that are run by agents is that you might not necessarily pick up any students from that event, but what you're doing is you're supporting that agent. And it will be a matter of following up in the weeks and months to follow. Say, we came to the event. We didn't actually get many families, but what are you doing now to support me? I've shown you support. You've now got to support me. And what I would say about that is, the Alfie events are brilliant, but you're only going out to meet agents. So it's like another level. It's another layer. And you've then got to work with all those agents to get to the families. So, it's almost 2 different strategies, going to an Alfie event and going to an agent event, because an agent event, you are going to be exposing yourself to families. And if you can do anything else with alumni or anything else to support that trip, that's going to help you. But I would say you can take a punt. Definitely ask other schools if they've been on certain events. But chances are the other schools aren't going to be a school like yours. And, they might have built up a reputation in that country for 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
I know a couple of schools that have done brilliantly. They are doing brilliantly out of Nigeria now, but they've been going for 6 or 7 years religiously, sometimes twice a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Just sounds like hard work, more hard work. There's no escape.
Going to an event isn't going to result necessarily in students straight away.
No, and I don't expect that at all. But it's just that what you were saying, that you're now organising them yourself. That's because you've got experience and you've been before and you know the ropes.
Yes. I was going to say yes, and in Nigeria, I wouldn't ever do that until I'd been over on a couple of organised trips. But I did go to Bangkok in November, completely independently. I got literally my accommodation and flights on lastminute.com. I contacted all the agents out there. I had 3 days and I whizzed around and I saw all the agents. I mean, the total bill was ridiculously cheap and it was money very well spent. So if there are countries where you can feel confident doing that, I would wholeheartedly say do that first.
Yeah.
Not in Nigeria.
No, not to start with anyway.
I don't think ever. I think certainly I was speaking to one head who told us how he nearly got kidnapped when he was in Nigeria, and it was his Nigerian agent who saved him. So I don't think Nigeria is one where people start going on their own. So thank you.
I do have a contact who could get you armed security, so don't worry about that.
Excellent. I've got your name, I've got your number. I'll hunt you down, Sarah. Thank you.
Excellent. It's a whole new stream. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I'd now like to hand over to Mercedes, who's going to give us a very quick update on Applica and how it can save you a lot of time and money when it comes to scholarships and bursaries. So over to you, Mercedes.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and thank you very much, Sarah. That was really insightful. I'll definitely try and take those tips on and pass them on to some of the schools I work with. But yes, so I am Mercedes. I am the CSM Customer Success Manager here at Applica for independent schools, and I help onboard and help set up and then launch, and then with the support post launch of the actual platforms. Now, so Applica is here to help with all of your admissions and bursary needs. So we've got two platforms. We've got our Admissions Plus platform and our bursary platform. We were born in 2016 because our CEOs found they were working as teachers in some local state schools in London. They found that the neighbouring schools were taking the students, and they were losing out in the market. So they thought, there must be a better way to handle the admissions, and that's how we were born. So from there, we obviously started with our Admissions Plus, and then we've branched out into bursary, as well as a few other platforms. But for that, we're now working with over 1,300 UK and international schools, with more than one of our platforms. And in 2018, so GDST, the Girls' Day School Trust, came on board, and they actually helped us to develop the Bursary Plus and the Admissions Plus platform that is marketed towards independent schools. So with that, the Admissions Plus platform is an end-to-end platform, starting with the inquiry and events right through the admissions process, including your open days, one-to-one meetings, parental communications, and your offers. It's obviously quite important to get all of that information at once, and it means that you don't have to keep kind of chasing, saying, oh, have you paid your registration fee, etc., because we all know that they like to try and skip out on that one. And then we've also got your Bursary Plus, which works alongside our Admissions Plus platform, but it can also be independent from it, and it will manage your existing and new bursary applications, so parents are able to apply safely and securely online, and you can also ask them to upload the supporting documents, so that you don't have to chase for them. They are there when they are submitted, and the system will then be able to give you a summary and a recommendation as to whether or not the families will be able to are eligible to receive a bursary or school. So that's a very brief kind of introduction as to all of it, as to the Applica family, as it were. But if you do have any questions, please do ping them over to me, and I'll be able to help.